This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Ready? 3, 2, 1. Normally I do that on 3.
You already did it backwards. You're starting backwards right away.
I'm going to do this backwards.
Are we doing it again?
Welcome to Auteur Detour After Dark. We're recording this one late night.
Yes.
I'm Ian Hinckley, here as always with Travis White.
Hello.
And Chris Palazza.
Good evening, all.
And we're here talking about Coen Brothers movies up to this current classic, No Country for Old Men. It follows... I know the characters. I don't have my notes in front of me. Ed Tom Bell is played by Tommy Lee Jones as the sheriff of a Texas town. Anton Chigurh is Javier Bardem as an unstoppable force of killing or death or evil, or we'll get into it. And Llewellyn Moss is played by Josh Brolin as a hunter who happens across a drug deal gone wrong, lots of dead bodies scattered everywhere, and a big pile of money in a briefcase, which he makes off with. And the rest of the movie is basically Anton Chigurh trying to get that money from him, as well as a pack of Mexicans trying to get that money from him. And Ed Tom Bell kind of cleaning up the wake, but also mostly commenting on the dismal tide that is following and growing in the Texas landscape. We don't have to get too much into the plot right now because I want to get into it as we go. But I love this movie.
Yes.
Chris, what do you think about this
Love this movie. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. Oh, can't wait to talk about this one. I have a feeling Travis feels a little bit differently, though. I see that look on your face.
No, I was just kidding. I love this movie. This is
Okay.
this is
No, I was going to
also
say,
love
you
it.
guys know me. I'm sorry, how do you feel about it, Ian? You just mentioned it, but what do you want to say?
No, I fucking love it. It's like, for me, it's, ushering in like a completely different level of filmmaking for the Coen brothers, where it's like, if Fargo sort of cemented them as like the indie auteurs of their era, then this one really solidified them as like, in my mind, as like the real like next generation of like, I don't know, masterful auteurs, like in a different way, like the way that you think of a Hitchcock or a Scorsese, or like not even like a, I don't know, like it's a different level to me, like above indie cinema even.
Totally. I mean, you guys know me, and I'm a big fan of like a mystery kind of a movie. And this movie's not an actual mystery. It's pretty clear what's happening at all times. But this movie, I think, respects the audience more than almost any movie I've ever seen. And by that, I mean, some director, I can't remember who, said, when you're making a movie, don't give them 4, give them 2 + 2 and make them put it together. And this movie does that throughout the entire film. I swear to God, I've seen this so many times, and every single time I found something I didn't see before. Like this time, for example, I didn't ever notice that he's a poacher. Like he's putting the guns up in the beginning of the movie and underneath his trailer, and there's the pelts. I never, for some reason, didn't put it together. He's like poaching these animals illegally. I had no, it's not like but it's like, it gives you a little bit of an insight as to the character early on, right? And this movie's full of that kind of thing. And so if you watch really carefully, it really rewards the viewer tremendously, and it's just such an amazing movie.
For me, it's a hard movie to have multiple rewatches of. Like, it's not I mean, this time that I watched it, I was less truly like affected by it, as opposed to some of the other times when I've watched it, where like it changes my mood for the week. Like, it's so fucking dark. Travis, you go though. What was your experience with it in the past and now and whatever?
Well, you might be interested to learn that the first time I saw this movie. Well, Jenny and I both work in the film industry. You guys wouldn't understand, but we're like a family in a lot of ways. We got randomly somehow, I don't know how it worked out, but like Jenny has some contacts at San Francisco Film Society or something like that, and there were some free tickets to like a early screening and stuff like that. They just the studio gave away. I think they were. I don't know if they were like wanted like feedback or something like that, but it was an audience definitely not of like all people from the Film Society. It was just like riffraff off the street, because this was like a hoot and hollering audience that was like, that was very noisy throughout like the very quiet film. You know what I mean? So it was like kind of an interesting experience. I actually saw The Man Who Wasn't There in similar circumstances. That was at a film festival in Santa Barbara where I went to college.
Oh, wow.
And it was like the opposite end of the spectrum, but just as obnoxious. It was like all old people laughing super hard at every little, smidgen of humor to like make sure we all like heard how hard they were affected by each joke.
I thought you were going to go the other way, because my least favorite thing about seeing something at like that kind of erudite film festival kind of crowd is when they like won't like engage with the movie in any kind of way. You know, we talked a long time ago about like how like my view of like film as a medium is like the gathering, same thing with theater, of like gathering around a light and having somebody tell you a story, like from like primitive fire, ages to now, like it's still being passed on. And like I hate it when it's literally like you go in and it's just like, I've been to a lot of film festivals also, and people are just like studying the movie and like think that they're like, I don't know, fucking smart and like trying to like reach into it. Wow. I don't know, I'm an asshole.
So you sit with people, they don't say anything, and you're like, fuck these people. Just
I'm like, you guys think you're so much better than me.
You're just in the middle of the movie, you just stand up. I know what you're thinking. I know what you think about me.
Yeah. And I was watching fucking Pee-wee's Big Adventure. No.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this is like just like some really like obnoxious chuckles that just like really made it hard to enjoy the movie. But I still really liked it, and I still really loved this movie when I saw it in theaters. It did stick with me in a way that, well, I'll just say, like, responding to a couple things you said, Ian, it does feel like a timeless classic film, and the fact that it's like in this kind of very like normcore aesthetic of like East Texas of like the early 80s or something, like
it's 80.
It's like impossible to place, though. It could be like really any era from like a pretty big swath.
Definitely, as far as the aesthetic is concerned, just because like they mention it in the movie.
They make you do math to figure it out too, right? Like, and that's another thing. One of my points.
Well, it's twice.
The coin.
It's actually just to have a little Easter egg here, or not an Easter egg, but like a little thing to get into if we want to. But he mentions the coin being from 1958, and that it takes 22 years to get to this spot.
Right.
Also, fuck me, what's her name? The wife,
Carla Jean.
Carla Jean's mom dies, and on her gravestone it says 1958 to 1980. So like her lifespan is the same as that coin's in that moment. Which may be just like a throwaway little thing that they threw in there, or that Cormac McCarthy threw in there. But
so it says she's 22 years old when she died.
She looked.
You said it was 58 to 1980. I mean, she's only 22.
Maybe.
But the point I think you're saying is that it said she died in 1980, so it tells you what year it is. Basically, I think
she was. I don't remember. There was something in there. She definitely was not 22.
The point is, it's a timeless looking movie, and it felt like they were going for like kind of a timeless feel, and they were really constructing something that like didn't have a lot of the same kind of goofy flourishes that a lot of their other movies have. They come close to it a few times, and you're like, no, don't do it. Yeah, that was the one moment in the theater where like, all the like, the real time kind of like gunplay puts you on the edge of your seat, but nothing made me more tense than when they kind of threatened to break the spell of their own movie than when they filmed those mariachi guys with the camera kind of like craning down, and I'm like, no, it's too funny.
Had the same feeling.
And then it stopped, and I was like, oh, thank God. So it gave me like a hard time. So
with that moment and the Carla Jean's mom moment where she's like an over-the-top Coen's comic character in a lot of ways, the way that she's like, I don't know, she
straddles the line between like believably obnoxious and like comedic, like mad TV character.
Exactly.
But like so it's a timeless looking movie, and it sticks with you in a way that you don't have to rewatch it. I do think it actually is fun to rewatch, because it's like, to me, I mean, I remember at the time, like, this came out the same year as There Will Be Blood. And people were like, which one do you like more? And I was like, you know, I thought There Will Be Blood was like Citizen Kane level of filmmaking. And I thought this was a great thriller. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of thought they were very hard to compare, but this felt more like a genre movie, you know, in the best possible way, than like a real like art movie, like There Will Be Blood. But I'm just saying, like, and I can go back and watch this now. Like, I watched it. I didn't need to watch it for years, but I just watched it like a month ago, and I was like, it was so good, and it was so much fun to watch. And even though it is dark and affecting and upsetting, it is like a great ride. And then I was like really excited to watch it again, and yeah, just as good like watching it a month later.
I first saw it at Sebastiani Theater, and I went by myself. I don't know why.
Loser! Maybe because you'd yelled at everyone else watching the movies with you about how pretentious they were.
I was married at the time. I don't know why Danielle didn't come with me, but you know, I definitely saw it with her also. But I remember seeing it the first time by myself and walking home from the theater, just feeling like complete like garbage, like just feeling like, oh, we are truly fucked, like the world is not okay. And just like, I mean, in a good way, like that's, you know, you laugh, but like it is like effective.
How in a good way? What do you mean you mean like the movie was good, the movie was effective
in the way that like it was so powerful to me that like I was rocked to my core. Like that's what was good.
So not a good way.
Not in a good way. Like, oh, I'm glad I feel like this. Right. But just like, holy shit. How often do you see a movie that like gets you like that?
It's so funny. Like, really totally.
Ruins your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not often.
Just rips your soul right out of your body. I love it. It's a great feeling. No, I remember when I saw it too, at the very end, one surprised the living shit out of me because it's just this cut to black. Right. And then I remember, most movies I just kind of, you know, I'll let the credits play a little bit and I'll just like, you know, look around. This one, I forgot that the credits were even going until like the very end because I'm just sitting in my seat like, what did I just witness? What did I just experience here? This is one of those few movies where that's actually happened that I can recall, you know. You're right. Just it lingers with you. When I rewatched it, the same effect, of course, wasn't there this time, but I had to rewatch the end a couple of times just to really let it sink in. The ending's something I'd like to talk with you guys a little bit more about. Maybe we touch on that later, but there's a lot of stuff to cover in this movie.
Because I do too.
Yeah, where do we start?
It's worth mentioning about the ending is that like, and the rest of the movie is that this is their first adaptation of a book. And it's, you know, Cormac McCarthy is obviously a dark writer, and he writes a lot of fucked up books, and this is, you know, one of them. And I read the book after I saw the movie, and, you know, even if I hadn't, it's well documented that like page to screen, it's like almost identical. Like there's very little that is in the movie that's not like word perfect in the book.
Which is incredible because like there's so many parallels to their other films in this movie. Like it's so closely, absolutely. It's like a perfectly overlapping Venn diagram to their whole really world view. And it's like talking about circles, but like
well said.
And you know, I mean, I have a theory about that because we can just get into. I mean, this can be another meandering conversation because.
But you didn't think about it while you watched the movie, did you? Like some pretentious snob.
How dare you? No, you don't know what I mean. I just mean like people that like are like not in the movie with the movie. They're just like trying to analyze the movie too much.
Yeah, it's like other people are like ants or like animal, like less than human, but you're a human. Like I know that.
Right. You get it. So my thinking about what you were talking about a second ago, and also what you've brought up in the past about like how a lot of their movies, especially starting with Raising Arizona, like definitively, but like it happens throughout their filmography about like a minor discretion or, you know, or an act of...
transgression is the word I use.
What did I say? Aggression?
Discretion?
Discretion? All right.
Dissection?
Listen, I used the wrong words. I'm not smart. A transgression... But, you know, it can be worse than that.
It just needs to rhyme. Is the important thing.
a aggressive transgression can I digress. Happens. Don't take it out of me.
All right.
Happens, and it unleashes this sort of, unstoppable evil into the world. It's the Leonard Small's character in Raising Arizona. This one, I was completely on board with that because it is such a constant in their movies, and it is that in this. But the thing that's interesting to me watching it this time with that in my head is that this movie opens with Anton Chigurh. And it opens with him arrested for something that we never find out what it is for. And he, strangles this cop to death in like a complete like monster movie, like creeping up to the camera, like just pure evil. You never see him get this like manic for the rest of the movie where his eyes are bulging out of his head as he's like choking the cop with his handcuffs. And it's like the evil is there before he does the what I was saying, transgression. Like it's there. And to me, the thing that I really took away from this movie as far as what we talk about in this podcast is like, if there's a bigger parallel, even it's The Big Lebowski, because if the dude in The Big Lebowski is this like avatar for like a tumbleweed rolling through life and everything's sort of happening around him, but he has the same sort of like, fuck it, like I'm the dude kind of attitude. Like this movie is Anton Chigurh like as this like vision of death that's impending for everybody, no matter who they are, whether it's like Woody Harrelson or Stephen Root or Llewellyn Moss or like anybody, is like, the fucking gas station attendant. Like everybody that comes into contact with him is like the opposite of the people who come into contact with the dude, where it's just like, like I'm witnessing, instead of life, it's like death. Like it's like, I don't know. I feel like those are the two characters that like represent the two sides of the Coen brothers battle for whether they're happy about being alive or not happy about being alive. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that their view of the world necessarily makes them happy or not happy to be alive. But like, I get what you're saying is like, they represent their kind of like what is joyful about being alive and what is like horrifying about being alive.
Exactly.
Well, so I think it's interesting that you bring up the fact that Chigurh exists at the beginning of the movie, and then you hear also Tommy Lee Jones, his voiceover. Like Tommy Lee Jones in this movie kind of starts out like at the end of a career that maybe I imagine like Marge Gunderson had, like she saw some truly dark stuff that like shook her to her core, and now she's like having trouble like at a certain point like going on with her life, like this career of like facing down crime.
They are very parallel characters. I feel like Marge Anderson.
I feel like where she ends is where he begins, kind of, only like with
or at least like 30 years from where she ends in that
exactly.
movie. Like,
just suck every bit of like subcutaneous fat out of her face. And then you're left with something resembling Tommy Lee Jones in this movie. But I also think, okay, so it's interesting that Chigurh exists in this movie because we'll talk about it a little more, but I don't know that the taking the money from the crime scene was the original sin of this movie. I think the original sin of this movie was the killing of Native Americans in America. I feel like that is like that's the inciting incident.
What?
And like it's like there's something about like talking about like the hard land of America, and like that there's just something in like in the land, this like original sin that is like, even though things seem okay like at certain points, it's always been here and it's gonna take us all down with it, and like we're gonna return to that. Like kids are wearing mohawks and bones through their noses, like the natives are gonna take back the land, and the kind of violence that was kind of given out to them, doled out to them, will be like returned. And that's kind of I don't know. I think that's like a background thing. I don't think that's like the only plot of the film. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's like a strong theme though.
Well, Chris, I want you to weigh in on all this stuff, but I also really want to say, like, I do hear that, and I think that's a different way of saying, like, my sort of other take on it, which is not just that he's like impending death, but also just like there's a lot of class and money consciousness in this movie, and like I do feel like it's there, like, or Cormac McCarthy's, or I'm just gonna put it on the Coen brothers because I don't want to keep giving them both credit, but you know what I mean. They're like takedown of like the cruelty in America, and whether you like put that on Original Sin or of like the way we treated Native Americans, or just like whatever it is that's like got us to this place where there's just the dismal tide of like we're just like in this fucking dark landscape,
Yeah, definitely a consistent theme of there is this present evil. Always there's some kind of evil lurking and we awaken it, and I'm not sure where it comes from or even if it has a source, if it's just always been there. I never thought about the Native American interpretation, actually. That's an interesting one. But I was just thinking about all the other Coen Brothers films and how this one actually sets itself apart from the other ones is, for me, the confidence that they're operating on in this one compared to some of the other ones is just next level. They're so confident in this movie that there's no music needed. They don't need to ramp up any tension with any like swelling score, anything. It's silent. It's silent and it's confident. They don't need to explain anything with over.
Is music. They use the silence as music. Like the way that they mix the sound with the footsteps and like, not T-Bone Burnett, Carter Burwell did add lots of ambient sound like as his score for the movie. It's just not musical instruments.
And totally. Speaking of that too, I didn't even pick up on the ticking clock at the very end as like that's the last sound you hear even before the credits roll is the ticking, like the ticking of time, right? Like the passage of our lives basically. And I never even picked up on that. But yeah, it's just full of again on the confidence level where there's no narrator, like, I'm back and this and that, so-and-so said. There's a few, like, silly movies where there's the narrator explaining everything, and there's even, like, certain, not subtitles, but, like, captions and stuff. There were multiple times in this movie where another kind of maybe lesser filmmaker would have put subtitles or captions. Like, for example, when Llewellyn Moss finds the man in from the only survivor from the shootout in the car, a guy's like, agua, and he goes, cerra la puerta, hay lobos. There's no subtitle. If you don't understand Spanish, you don't understand what he's saying. He's like, close the door, there's wolves out here. He's like, no hay lobos or whatever. And, there's just so many, it just moves so confidently in a way that their other films. They're confident filmmakers from the beginning. I don't mean to like paint them as incompetent.
That's what I was trying to say when I said like,
but it's like that takes it to another level,
notch above. Like, and I don't even mean that like to say that like this is for sure already my number one, because I'm not even sure that it is, because I love some of their other like, confidence doesn't necessarily always mean that it's the best movie, but it does feel like they're just like operating on a new level, which is worth mentioning. We're coming off two movies that were so fucking hard to watch that like, how did this movie come next? Like,
it's nice. There's like 3 or 4 layer years between them too. There wasn't like they just cranked this one out back to back like they did Lady Killers and Intolerable Cruelty.
I think this is the biggest break that they'd taken between feature films, and I feel like. Ian, I feel like you always have this very personal take on like what's going through their minds when they make a movie and stuff like that. And I really try to like avoid that. But with this movie, it really seems like, if you look at their career at this point, it really seems like they like make like a masterpiece, or they make like some amazing statement, and then they kind of like spin their wheels for a while. And then it can go and like, it can be really good, or it can be like a little off the mark, you know what I mean? They're, it always like with a lot of talent and always like kind of swinging for the fences in some way, but like then they kind of get back to basics in a way. And at this point, they had made 10 movies or something like that.
11,
they made a lot. They'd made a fair number of movies, and the last 2 were particularly uninspired.
Egregious?
I think we can say. I feel like uninspired. Like they didn't know what they were going for, or they were trying to do something new and it didn't feel right. So they kind of again return kind of back to basics, back to this same kind of like story kind of structure that they've done before. But apparently this was brought to them. Somebody said like, hey, what about doing a book on this? And I think like, they're very literary directors. They've done like a lot of like literary plagiarism like in their movies. And I think they were like, they said this is something new that we can do. Like this is we can do an adaptation of a book that like parallels our kind of worldview, done by a master storyteller, and we can kind of dig in as much or as little as we want to with these like incredible characters. And I think it was just like the perfect vehicle for them. And I think they took the opportunity to say like, okay, we have this great story structure. What if we had like no music? You know what I mean? Like, what if we did it just like in this kind? What if we just kind of did like a free fall? And just like only could rely on like the way we ratchet up the tension, like super, like very naturally and very kind of brick by brick, as they've said.
I don't want to pretend like it didn't take a lot of work to write this movie just because it was such a direct parallel to the book, because I'm sure it did. You know what I mean? Like a lot of thought went into the writing besides what they say, which is that like one brother held the book spine open and the other person, etched out the words. But that being said, I think that it did give like free up like a level of directing for them that like made the directing more important than the writing, maybe for the first time, because they really just like we keep saying it. It was just like, it's a level of confidence, but it's really also a level of just skill. Like it's so fucking powerful. Like, I don't know, the pacing, even though it's their longest movie before, Buster Scruggs comes out, but it's over 2 hours. It's the only one that's over 2 hours. And it's, but it's still like, it fucking moves. Like it doesn't, I'm never like trying to, check my phone or anything watching this movie. It's so fucking just good.
But that does go back to like the confidence thing. Like there are long stretches of this movie where there's no talking. There's long stretches where like nothing really happens. You follow the characters like in real time, and it kind of like, you watch Llewellyn like go through all these steps of like hiding the money in the hotel room, which could have been done like in a little montage, like in under a minute. Right. And instead they show you like piece by piece, like how he's going about doing
buying
it.
Clothes. Like it shows him like
yeah, exactly. There's like the weight of time is on you. Like, and like you were saying, the tick of the clock, they also utilize dissolves in this movie, which I don't remember ever seeing in their films. Like,
I was going to say.
Definitely not, like almost every scene like uses a dissolve to cut from one to the next. There's a couple that are very like David Lynch-like too, with driving on the road and stuff. And then even the credits have dissolves. Did you guys notice that? It dissolves from one name to the next, and you're like, I've never seen credits like that. Anyway.
No, absolutely. It does so many different things than most movies would. I mean, a theme, of course, would be like the opening narration from a character that we never hear any other narration again. But it's also like there's no final standoff at all. You'd think there's the good guy and the bad guy, and most movies are going to eventually meet at the end.
We're gonna sort of skip around even more then, I guess, because I disagree. I think that the final standoff doesn't happen right at the end, but I think that the Carla Jean Anton Chigurh standoff is like the what am I looking for? The thesis of the movie right there. Or at least that's like the final, like the first time that he gets sort of well, okay, sorry. We can edit this little stammering out. Just kidding. But
I'm going to edit out most of your performance tonight, Ian. I hope that's understood.
So, I mentioned I read the book. There's a few things
several
that
times,
were different.
Ian. We heard.
Fuck off. There's a few different things.
Wait, there's a book, Ian?
That weren't in the movie. This is important. That they changed for the movie. And they were... Anytime that there was parallels that happened in the movie, which is such a Coen Brothers thing to do, where it's like, at the beginning, Anton says, hold still, and then it cuts to Llewellyn saying, hold still. It's like that kind of thing that wasn't in the book. Like that's a Coen Brothers thing. And the other big change that they made was to Carla Jean, who in the book is like a super religious 19-year-old girl who has almost no authority and no, like, I don't know. She's just like a damsel in distress in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the way that they've made that final sequence of her where she refuses to call the coin toss. And he's like, you have to call it. And she's like, no, it's not the coin, it's you. And he's like, I got here the same way that the coin got here. I'm just going to recite that scene because it's just a fucking masterful scene. But like, he obviously kills her. We don't see it. In the book, she ends up calling it and then he kills her. And it's like a thing, but they don't give you that in this movie. And that's a choice that the Coen brothers made to give this guy, this Anton Chigurh, you know, force that they've created of like death, of like, you know, I don't know, her character is less talked about for this movie than she deserves to be, because I think that like her having that moment of like, no, like you're doing this, like that's an important moment in the movie. And then as soon as that happens, he walks out and gets hit by a car. Like, it's like, it fucking rattles him, you know? He even raises his voice in that scene. He's like, you have to call it. Like, he's like, you know, that's kind of the only, it's not a showdown per se, but it's like, it's a confluence of like what he's been dealing with that you don't see coming, but then it's like the end of his story arc in a weird way.
Yeah.
He doesn't have an end to his story arc, but it's the apex of his story arc.
I love her, and that's really interesting to hear that, because I was actually thinking watching it tonight, like, you know, that all that dialogue between them must have been straight out of the book, like, you know, that like their relationship must have been right out of the book, because I love the two of them together, and I really love her
you mean
character.
Llewellyn
and her, yeah. Not Javier. Yeah, there should have been a spin-off with Javier Bardem and the wife, just like bickering, like, call it, like they just like, you know, every day is like, it's your turn to clean the apartment, call. You still haven't called it. It's been 10 seasons. But anyway, no, she's great, and
it makes me want to see Trainspotting again, just for her.
Dude.
You know? She's
awesome. She's not in a ton of movies, but I love seeing her.
And it's funny, her accent's so different because my kids watch Brave all the time. You know what I mean? Right. And she's Merida, and she's got a Scottish accent. Right. Cohen ain't got no say, so it's just you. You know,
yeah,
like the
totally,
super
totally
big,
buy it. Yeah,
you almost never know it's the same person. Yeah, she's amazing in this movie. There's a lot of just spot on performances. Obviously, I mean, Javier Bardem. I mean, come on, that guy's just like totally
best supporting actor,
just absolutely terrifying. I mean, he's always been a good actor, but that one, he's just totally owns the movie. Remember
hilarious,
watching,
creepy. He's hilarious. He's the second creepiest performance I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Second? That's the third. Okay, that's the third change to the movie from the book, is that, you know, his page boy haircut and his like nothing about him is described in the book. They only say that like he's maybe more ethnic than like Llewellyn is used to seeing around there. Something like it's like alluded to that he's from someplace else, but like they don't describe him at all. In this, he's like a cartoon character the way he looks. Like he's so bizarre looking.
But he's also kind of ambiguous looking too. Like he's not clearly like Mexican, you know, which he's he's a Latino, of course, but you don't necessarily know that. And he doesn't look like any of the other characters either, right? I mean, he's definitely he's in his own world. He operates on his own, his own time.
He's a ghost. World.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
I just think he's death. Like, I think that there's two things that he is. He's like death that's waiting for all of us. And he's like you said, Travis, like he's this like undercurrent of evil that's like in the soil of America. I'm
going to bring something else to it. I think he's rhythm. I think he's the soul of the dance.
I think he's the beat.
No.
What's the first most creepy character?
It's in a Werner Herzog's remake of Nosferatu. It's Klaus Kinski as Nosferatu.
Okay.
Literally the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, oh God,
it's a bold statement. It's a bold statement.
Okay, so in Raising Arizona, and I've said this, I think, on the podcast before, but I had this whole thing when I was writing like something after I watched this movie for the first time, like sort of writing my thoughts on it, and I realized the insane parallels between this and Raising Arizona, where I was like, okay, it's like this good old boy who like commits a crime, but it's like not that bad, but somehow it like, unleashes like unholy terror on like everyone on him, in his, and everyone in his life, and it's beyond just kind of what the crime kind of calls for, you know. But basically, he's transgressed some sort of like boundary, and there, in all the Coen Brothers movies, or in a lot of Coen Brothers movies, there's this kind of like overlapping like matrices of like human values and then like cosmic values. And there's these characters who can kind of like step outside of them or see outside of them, and they try to like, and I think this is why they're drawn to like people who like break the law, right? Stories about people who break the law. So it's like people who are like kind of testing the boundaries of these things. And I just think this story is like the perfect version for that. Cause like, I mean, Raising Arizona was like, they had to, you know, it's kind of a stretch to say that like, you know, if you steal a baby, like a Mad Max Thunderdome guy will come after you. But in this one, like, it kind of makes sense. And then also like, I totally lost my train of thought, but
well,
pass.
Speaking of the
but in Raising Arizona though, sorry, the Leonard Smalls he basically says like, it's like he says like, I'm just going off market forces, like basically I'm just like a tool of the market. And in this movie, like what's his name, Sugar is like, he is the market, he is money, he literally like his, you know, the money and him go where they're going the same way or something like that. Right. They're both kind of like, so it's he's like a market force, but he's not just pure business. Like he destroys people kind of like beyond like what they expect. Like, you know, like what would make sense. Like there's no reason for him to go after Llewellyn's like widow, but he does it anyway. So he's like something beyond. So he like represents market forces, like something we've created like out of our like systems, out of our markets that we have no control over and doesn't follow our rules. When he goes to murder people, they can't wrap their heads around the fact that they're about to die. Like he just puts a weapon up to their head and they're just sitting there like, what are you doing? Like, and then they die like never knowing, never understanding. I don't know. I just think that's interesting. Like he's so beyond like any human value that they can't even comprehend him.
Totally.
Ian, I'm so sorry. I interrupted you like 10 times. Oh yeah. Then Chris.
I was just going to I saw that you were losing your train of thought. I was going to pick it up because that's what I knew where you were going, because I think the fact that he uses the coin as a tool so much, not just to flip, but like to unscrew the fucking vents and like, that's his number one tool. He's got a fucking air gun and a coin, like a quarter, you know, like that's what he uses. And it's like, I totally thought about how, I mean, I've already mentioned it, about how much like, you know, this is an indictment of capitalism too. And like, you know, the Stephen Root character, who's unnamed except for I think he's like the man who hires Carter, who's Carter Wells is Woody Harrelson.
The powerful man behind the desk.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, those two, Carter Wells and Stephen Root, or Woody Harrelson and Stephen Root, to me were like, it doesn't matter if you have money or whatever, like it's going to get you too. You know what I mean? Like, and I loved that scene so much. I mean, Woody Harrelson's got a few scenes in this movie, but the scene where he's pleading for his life at the end, he's not even pleading, but he's just like, you don't have to do this. And he's like, everybody says that. Like, he's like, you know, it's like, it's so fucking powerful because it's like, even he who knows the score, like he gets it. He's already explained what this guy is to Llewellyn and he knows what he's in for, but he's just like, you don't have to do this. Like, he's like,
he offers him like money. He offers him $14,000 in sugar. Exactly. He's just like so amused. He's just like, as if he's like doing any of it for money. Yeah, like it actually makes no sense. The way that he gets amused
with him in that scene is so fucking good because he's just like, I'm amused at it too. Yeah. You know, it's a dark scene and it's sad. And Woody Harrelson's great. Like he really pulls off that like scared, brave guy. Like, cause he's so full of bravado for the earlier part. And then when he realizes he's done, he's so believably scared. And it's just
like mad at himself. Like he's just like going through a lot. Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah, it's funny you bring up Woody Harrelson because I was thinking of Anton Chigurh and Woody Harrelson and how kind of different they are in several ways, even though they're kind of going for the same thing. Chigurh, to me, we're talking about like what they kind of represent, and there's a way, like in a way, he represents random chaos in a way, like chance, randomness, while still maintaining a particular code, right? Where he's very superstitious. He's kind of like this particular way, as opposed to Woody Harrelson. And there's a really great scene. Speaking of little details, like you don't notice the first time, at least I didn't. But as he's leaving the initial meeting with Stephen Root, Woody Harrelson's character, he goes, as I approached the building, I counted, a certain number of floors. It's missing one, and I didn't get that the first time I watched it until I went to Las Vegas, and I'm like, oh shit, there's no 13th floor. You know what I mean? I stayed on the 14th and the room goes from 12 to 14. I'm like, there's no 13th floor. So obviously, the fact that there's no 13th floor just went completely over Woody Harrelson's head. Even though he's the most analytical guy, he can't possibly fathom why someone rationally would exclude a particular floor, right? So he's like the ordered agent versus the agent of chaos, of kind of random chance in a way. So they kind of set these character traits up in a kind of not diametrically opposed, but are certainly at odds with one another. And that last scene with the two of them is so intense, especially when the phone rings. It's silent, right? So anytime there's a loud noise, like when the crash happens or the phone rings, and I think it's when Woody kind of like reacts and is kind of scared by the phone, that kind of betrays him in a way. And I think in a sense, maybe that's what did what did him in, really. It's so weird because Chigurh's like code of who do we kill and who do we not. Like, it's very specific. Like, I think of the kind of the overweight old receptionist lady. Like, I don't give out that information, sir.
I know.
Like, he respects the shit out of her. Like, why didn't you just smoke this lady? I'm like, wait a minute.
Is that
she
why
has
you
a
think
code
he didn't do
and
it?
she's sticking to it. Like, she's not gonna do
wonder.
it. She's not gonna bend. She's like, no, fuck you. I'm not doing it. He's like, I respect that shit. Peace. You know what I mean?
I also think it's funny because it's like, that to me is again how people just like can't comprehend the danger that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
When like, if you were listening to your gut and not just like the niceties of what you imagine society to be, you would run the second you saw that guy. Like, he's so terrifying just in appearance.
Well, speaking of that, is the earlier scene, I think it's the second scene of the movie with the gas station attendant, which is like the Oscar clip, with for Javier Bardem.
Yep.
It's so friendo, it's like that guy's performance. I don't know, maybe he's some character actor that's been around forever, I don't know, but he's the fucking MVP of this movie.
It really seems like they grab people off the street to like play all the random people that he meets up with, and they're all so pitch perfect.
It's so pitch perfect. Like, the fear in his, like, that's what you would do if that guy walks into your store, is just like, no, we're closer. It's like,
well, first he
like
tries to make
to
conversation with him. It took him a while to get scared of him. Yeah.
Right. Because he didn't know. I mean, that guy walks in, you're not immediately scared when you see him, but the second he starts to get like in his fucking Chigurhness,
I think
it's just like, why are you asking me that?
I think I would be scared. I think the people in this movie live like the cows that they like, depend upon for cowboy boots and meat. Like, I think the point of this movie is that like, people just go about their lives like in this kind of like docile way, and then there's other people who like are doing something else, like the kind of the lawbreakers, like the outlaws, like the cats in that guy's house.
Well, they're just not used to that kind of guy at all. You can tell, like, they've never encountered a human being like that would just challenge them so directly.
There is no human being like that.
All.
And he's like, I think that, he's somebody I think who sees the hand of fate, like, in a way that we can't, like, our human brains don't allow us to. Like, he is crazy. Like, I mean, what did Woody Harrelson say about him? Like, he has no sense of humor. Like, there's something inhuman about him. Like, the fact that he has no sense of humor like sets him apart from us. But I think he understands that, like, that the world we live in is a made up thing. Like, it is just a code that we kind of make up in our head.
Yeah, and you see that when he gets like amused by people when they're trying to set it in order.
Yes, exactly.
And
and he's just like and he understands that he actually doesn't have control of his life, just like no one does, and that he's just like I don't know, it's like beyond good and evil. I think is what kind of sets him apart. And there are other characters like that in Coen Brothers movies, like even Steve Buscemi when he watches like Gare, whatever his name is, like murder somebody, and he is like, oh, I can just kill people, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
He's seen like a glimpse of that, but Anton Chigurh like embodies that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. We should stop talking about Chigurh for a minute and talk about there's two other, leads in the movie, which we haven't really talked a lot about. I think that Ed Tom Bell is I guess you wouldn't call him a narrator because he's not a narrator, but he's the eyes of the book. Like the book is told, through him, and then also the movie in a lot of ways. Like he's sort of his part doesn't play any role into what happens in the movie. He just sort of comments on it as it's happening a little bit behind, unfortunately. And it's more of just, in that way, he's the narrator, But like his performance is incredible also. Like I'm not a huge Tommy Lee Jones fan. He's made some of my favorite movies, but, Batman Forever, and I'm just kidding. But he's nobody's ever looked more tired than he looks in this movie. Like he's so fucking weathered. He just looks great.
He looks like leather.
He's so good in it. Yeah. I mean, he really is. And like the way that his character's retiring because he can't keep up with what he sees. Like you said, it's the Marge Gunderson 30 years from now. Because at the end of Fargo, she's like, I
just don't understand it.
There's something that I don't understand in this world. And here he is. He's been trying to fight the good fight for 30 years, but he's just like, it's just gotten away from me. I can't do it anymore. And he's from a family of lawmen that like have all been fighting it for forever. And, his uncle who he goes and visits, that's a crazy scene. I don't know. It's just like, that's where the title, the title's in reference to him and his story arc too, of just like, we can't like, I don't know, what's his, like, maybe you guys can say it better than I'm trying to right now, but it's just like, how are you supposed to maintain with this dismal tide that's just growing and not going away? Like, how are you supposed to keep fighting?
Well, it's also like him becoming disillusioned with the idea that like, there is anybody who can do it, right? Not just himself. Yeah. Like, in fact, part of this movie is kind of like, this is their first real, is it like their first real Western in a way? The image where he goes in the room to face Chigurh, who he thinks might be in the hotel room, and you think he might be because they are showing images of him out of chronological sequence. And he's like so scared, and then when he opens the door and all that's there is like this shadow of himself, but he like looks like a cowboy about to like draw his guns, but it's this kind of ghost of a cowboy with like that's like fractured because of the light, and it's like a really beautiful haunting image, and I feel like that's him seeing like the last like image of a cowboy that's just sort of like a fading shadow, or like an image that's like dissolving before his eyes, like sort of like a mythological thing that was never real, and also is still not real.
It's also the only time he draws a gun. It's the only time he holds a gun.
Yes, right, because he was like he didn't want to draw his gun. He was like
hiding
thought it was
behind
so cool to not have to ever have a gun, right? That was his like idealized version of a sheriff,
Well, speaking of the cowboy, another parallel that they added to the movie was when Anton Chigurh sits down with a glass of milk and sees his reflection in the TV, and then later Tommy Lee Jones sits down at the same couch and grabs the same glass of milk and sees himself on the TV, and you see both of the reflections in the TV, and his is like, Chigurh's is really like, it's almost like he's seeing like the monster movie character that he is, like he's seeing this, horror image on the screen, and then he's like seeing like an old washed up cowboy on the screen. It's like, and he's got the dream sequence in the movie. We always talk about the Coen brothers dream sequences. He describes two dreams. One is, referencing money, and then the other one is referencing like how death's coming for us all, and it's like it's it's another one of those. which is crazy that it's straight from the last page of the book, because like you said, it's exactly what the Coens always do. I don't know.
Yeah, again, and the ending on the dream sequence was straight out of a very affecting dream sequence. Like maybe the most emotionally affecting part of the whole movie is very, very similar to Raising Arizona. And I know, I think I brought this up already in our Raising Arizona podcast, but the fact that Chigurh takes his gun out to shoot at a bird on a bridge randomly, just like Leonard Small shoots at the animals on the side of the road, is a very crazy parallel.
And Oh Brother, right?
Yes, that's
the
right.
Cows.
That's right. Yeah. Not the cows.
Yeah.
Oh, you quoted Oh Brother, you motherfucker. You said.
I was making fun of it. I was saying it was stupid. Whatever.
I saw that smile on your face. Betrayed.
So let's talk about some other Coens. I mean, we can talk for a minute about Llewellyn Moss also, because I think it's interesting that he, potentially could have gotten off scot-free if he hadn't gone back to give the dying guy in the truck water.
Why do you say that?
Right, and again...
Why do I say that?
He had the money with the transponder, and they would have found him anyway, wouldn't they?
Well, unless he would have found the transponder in that time.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I was wondering about that scene too. What were you going to say?
They get him. They certainly get him faster because he went back. And I mean, again, that is somebody who has a code that they have to live by, right? I mean, they see themselves in a certain way, in a certain moral framework. And even though he's an outlaw, he has decency to other people. So in the middle of the night, he's like, God damn it, I have to do that thing. And again, that's the thing that like Chigurh would like laugh at. You know what I mean? Like, it's like he just makes up this thing that he has to do, which he should have done it. It is decent. He literally
says,
he's like, this is a really dumb thing, but I have to do it anyway. And then that kind of dooms him from the beginning.
Because also, remember, it's not, Chigurh does not kill Llewellyn. It's the Mexicans that kill Llewellyn.
Right.
Like it's, those guys are on his trail the whole time too. And potentially that wouldn't, there were 2 transponders, I guess, but, I don't know. I think it potentially could have played out differently had he not done that, because, they're there when he goes back. And,
yeah, I was wondering the first time I saw, like, why is he going back? It doesn't make sense. But then, so I was like, because he kind of just was cold to the guy in the beginning, but, was like, oh, I'm going to leave your door open, whatever, I don't care. But I'm like, wait a minute, no, he has a code. He's clearly up, like, thinking about this. And then we learned, of course, later he was in Vietnam, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so there may still be, like, some trauma about that, at play in this character's background and whatever as well, it's all these little subtle character details that aren't like explicitly stated, but they're on the screen.
The same thing that does that is the same, stupidity that like gets him killed, because he's just got this bravado that he hasn't earned. You know what I mean? Like he thinks that he's tough shit, but like. And he does stand up.
Pretty good. He's pretty tough.
He's pretty badass.
I was when I was watching it last night. I was like, tonight. I was like, I would have been dead in the first 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, he does a pretty good job.
I'm not saying he's not, because he's definitely a badass. But when he hangs up on Chigurh, when they're on the phone together, and like Chigurh gives his wife an out, and he's like, no, like I can take you on, like, like that's another stupid moment where.
But how? Wait a minute. He couldn't. But he's not going to choose like, okay, I'll give myself up to die to you. I feel like that's a choice that maybe makes sense to Chigurh, but I don't think that's a choice that any human being can walk into. Like,
but
again,
don't you
other
think
people
that like
couldn't even
he
face
could
the
have
idea
said
that they were
okay
gonna
and still faced Chigurh? Like, if he literally thought that he was going to kill, that he had a chance to kill Chigurh, he could have said, okay, I'll take you up on that, and then tried to kill Chigurh. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's not that. Well, he's not that like wily, right? He's more just like survival mode, like you know what I mean,
right.
Like soldier. He's not like, smart. You know who I love in this movie? The deputy. Tommy Lee Jones.
Garret Dillahunt.
Yeah, that guy. He's always great in movies, but he's
always great.
Yeah, he's always great. But this is my favorite performance by him. He's
totally.
So
he auditioned for Llewellyn 5 times before it went to Josh Brolin, which is kind of a tragedy. Although I think Josh Brolin is perfect.
No. Yeah, no one else.
That guy kind of reminds me of like Fargo's Lou. Like, I don't agree with your police work there, Lou. He's like, wow, Archie, how did you figure that? Right. Oh, good. police working. Wow. You know, he's kind of like the dumb, like, ride-along guy.
The decent
but he is great.
man, but yeah.
But yeah, not the sharpest tool in the shed, you know?
If we're talking about sort of minor characters in the movie, not that, you know, I mean, he's a great character, but Stephen Root's the only character in this movie, or the only actor in this movie that they've ever worked with before this one, which is so rare for them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's interesting. I don't know why they, you know, didn't hire anybody from their stable except for him. And he's great in it. I mean, has a tendency usually to just ham it up in a way that works for him anyway, you know, because he's comfortable in that zone where he's like
the ham zone,
can pull off the like ham zone, but
we're all
in a way that like
zone.
Most people cannot, like including in Coen Brothers movies. Like even when he's like way over the top in Oh Brother Where Art Thou, where he's like, you know, yip 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 yip, you know, doing all that like yip yip shit. It's like
screaming the N word. Yeah, it's hilarious.
But like this one, he's so dialed down in a way that like I forgot that he was in this movie when I watched it this time. And then he shows up and I'm like, look at him fucking acting his ass off and really just like going, like dialing it down. You know, you talked about amazing. In the Fargo episode, you talked about how the Coens are like you realize that the Coens are masters because they can tweak their dials. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and like I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it because they really tweak their dials down in this one. Like this is if Fargo had been their most naturalistic movie, like this is naturalistic to a fucking actual degree of naturalism. Like it's very natural. And Stephen Root is very natural in this too. Like you have to wonder if they had to like tweak that dial down hard on him because I don't know. He's really like
no, just thinking about that too. How you know how we talk about themes and no one repeats anything that someone else says or anything in this movie, which would be the way a normal thing goes, right? It's kind of unnatural for characters who've never met one another to say the same, like, what kind of man are you? You know, or whatever.
The only times it happens is that like hold still moment.
Right.
When they both are saying that
but that's more of like a parallel, you know, rather than like a repeated motif throughout the movie.
Speaking in Stephen Root's office, again, going back to like people who can't like just get their head around the idea that they're about to die. The guy who's like, "Are you gonna kill me?" And then the most amazing answer, "That depends. Can you see me?" Like, which is my favorite line of the whole movie.
I just realized we've been talking for an hour.
That's fine. Let's just keep going.
That's totally fine.
Let's just keep going. Like,
moving.
Speaking of, I mean, it makes sense that they got a lot of their amazing dialogue from the book. I have not read any Cormac McCarthy, but I'm familiar with like a lot of lines and a lot of stuff from his books, just because they're like out there. But I have seen a couple other Cormac McCarthy movies, including All the Pretty Horses, and a character gets a gun in All the Pretty Horses, and somebody asks him, "Where'd you get that gun?" And he's like, "The Getting Place." And that exact same line is in this movie. Thing. So it's almost like a Coen Brothers thing happening across films. But I think, guess that's just like, that's a line Cormac McCarthy likes, or maybe both those filmmakers.
I think it's also a Texas thing. Like that's a very Texas thing to say.
Yeah.
You know, and this movie's very Texas.
It seems like everybody also speaks in Texas colloquialisms, like, you know, which is like a very Coen Brothers thing to like pull out. So,
yeah. This also, you know, borrows from Blood Simple, the like Texas landscape, you know, montages almost, you know, that are like, I don't know. It's fucking beautiful to look at. Like Roger Deakins is obviously a master.
Yeah, this is a beautiful movie compared to like even some of the other ones he shot for them recently, which felt kind of like bland, like they were going for kind of like a blandness that just like, you know, mission accomplished, but like were really unpleasant to look at. And those weird kind of like CGI like settings in Lady Killers that just kind of like were so offensive to me.
Yeah, this one's beautiful without calling attention to itself in any particular way. Like, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is beautiful, but it's like, whoa, this is intense. You know, the filtering and everything. It's beautiful
like,
without...
It feels like you're watching a movie for sure. This one, you're right in it. Like I said, like my heart was racing while I saw it in the theater. It's like you were really fucking in it. And, you know, a big part of that is just like Roger Deakins. Like he really like puts you in there in that. I don't know. They storyboard out all their movies too. Like the Coen brothers are on top of that shit. They're good.
Yeah, the sound editing also really gets you in there.
That won an Oscar. This cleaned up at the Oscars. Like you said, it was up against
There Will
what's
Be
it called?
Blood.
There Will Be Blood.
Which I believe.
What a year. That year, man.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I actually heard a story. I'm not sure if this is true. I think they were initially, both films were going to be shot around. They were scouting locations around the same place. Like they're looking in California, I think in Southern California, and I think they both ended up at like kind of battling for the same position. Like, oh, this place would be great for this place would be great for our movie. And then
did you hear
the
story?
No, about what?
Because there's a shooting story about that where they had to stop shooting one scene for a day because the cloud was filled with smoke because Paul Thomas Anderson.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So they were right next to each other. I mean, they were like, what a fucking year. And Dark Knight came out this year.
No, the year after.
Like, oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was actually on my way to go see There Will Be Blood in December of 2007. Like literally on my way, and I saw on my phone and had to tell my wife and our friend who was meeting us that Heath Ledger had just died.
Oh shit!
I think it was in December around that time. Maybe January.
I forgot to mention it, but Heath Ledger didn't take the part of Anton Chigurh.
Oh.
He was they offered it to him first.
Interesting, yeah. Well, that's really interesting because like obviously he's so perfect for the Joker, and it's impossible to imagine anybody else but Javier Bardem playing Chigurh. Mm-hmm. But then Javier Bardem played a complete ripoff of the Joker in the James Bond movie.
I was gonna say in
Skyfall, which is like beat for beat a remake almost of
really
Dark
is.
Knight. It's crazy with Javier Bardem playing like kind of a combination basically of Chigurh and the Joker and like kind of like a mama's boy. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thought obviously Heath Ledger was a fucking brilliant actor, and I wonder what he would have done if it would have, he didn't take this role and then he took the Joker later. So I don't know if he would have done a Joker thing with this role. I think maybe the dead eyes of Bardem wouldn't have been there, like. So maybe, I don't know. I
can't imagine anyone else in this part. It's like, I love Javier Bardem so much in it. I don't want to stop thinking about him in this movie.
The other actor that was almost it was Mark Strong. Do you know that actor?
Yeah, the British guy.
No. Yeah, he would have been, British guy. Yeah. You'd recognize him. I think he's in
Guy Ritchie. He's in like a million Guy Ritchie movies.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
Yeah. Anyway, Bardem got it and was, brilliant. He auditioned for the role, or they offered him the role, and he said, I don't drive, I don't speak good English, and I hate violence. And they're like, perfect. Like, I don't care. You're perfect for it. So.
Yeah, he was. He was pretty intense in this movie. Beautiful, and I was like, this guy's got a real presence to him. Movie. He's like pretty like the movie's not like one of my favorites at all, but his performance in there was really like, wow, he's a really magnetic kind of a character, and he brings a little bit of that to the role of Chigurh. I can't imagine Heath Ledger playing him unless he really like changed his face a good bit, because he's a little like too good looking almost to be like a creepy looking guy without the facial scars and the makeup. I don't know. I can't see it, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't have done a good job. The guy's a hell of an actor, but maybe a little bit of the Australian accent or something too would have thrown his character into a little bit of like a weirder kind of like, who the hell is this guy? I don't know.
What else? Oh, we should talk for a minute before we wrap up about shit. I guess I was gonna say like motifs that the Coens always come back to. We talked about cyclical stuff. There's the coin is a circle in this. There's a shot in it where it like fades away from the coin and into a rock, and it's like, I don't know. That's the only real circle thing that's in this movie that I can think of, but it's definitely like a running thing throughout it,
Mm-hmm. Something that stood out to me that I hadn't really mentioned before was they use violence in their movies, Fargo
Thank
specifically.
you for bringing that up because I wanted to talk about that too.
Yeah, I was thinking about, violence is never glorified, particularly in their movies, especially this one. I mean, you think of Fargo, like one of the most iconic scenes where it's like this bloody wood chipper spitting
Blood
out
Simple
red.
has like the burial scene.
Totally.
And,
And it's like a terrifying...
Walsh's hand scene.
Yeah, and they don't seem to glorify it. And this one especially is a real, it's like an expose on like how, like, you can feel the effects of violence. There's multiple close-up scenes from multiple characters. Like Llewellyn Moss takes off his shoes and you see his terrible looking feet. They're just so jacked up. He's picking debris out of his like buckshot laden shoulder. And he's like,
I totally meant to talk about
sugar,
how visceral the like violence, but not just the violence, but the like
the aftermath,
in this
the aftermath of the violence. It's
which
not
is
just
like not something movies like focus on. Like right, this movie just like
it's
spends
real.
so much time watching them clean their wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
like Sugar's like the close up of him injecting himself to like numb the pain, and he's like pulling the thing, the bone sticking out of his arm at the end. It's just a real.
My favorite scene, besides maybe the gas station scene in the movie, is the shootout in the hotel. That's played like completely silently. And then, I mean, music wise, but you just hear those footsteps and the gunshots and like the tension. You see his shadow walk up to the door. It's just like, it's so fucking tense. It's just fucking brilliant filmmaking. And then like, there's that violent scene. That's what made me think of it, of like when he purposely crashes the truck so that Sugar thinks that he's dead. And then he gets in, I guess this was before. He gets in the passing truck and like he's like, okay, I'm not gonna hurt you. I just need you. And immediately the guy's fucking neck blows out and it's just like gurgling blood. Mm-hmm. It's so brutal.
It's horrifying and brutal, really, and it also powerful. Like shows like again he doesn't mean to do anybody any harm. He's like this is like a victimless crime, right? Of taking his money from like just a bunch of dead guys who botched a drug deal, but. From the very first, like almost from when he kills the dog, it's just like already like innocent lives are going to be taken, and then it's like wherever he goes, people die. Innocent people die. The hotel clerk dies in that sequence. The guy in the truck dies in that sequence. I think it's really important to like for the movie, saying like you shouldn't have done this, man. Like, but I also think the thing I was saying about like this violence that's like coming back to America, like to haunt America. So many of the characters are like war veterans too, and it's sort of like they're bringing their war expertise home to like back home to like and they're like, and then the guy says to Tommy Lee Jones like it's a war. I don't know what else you can call it. It's a war. Talking about like the violence that's happening between these people looking for the money, and I don't know. They say like the last I don't know how much of this is really in the movie, but just something that I've been thinking about lately. The last sort of like forefront or the last frontier of like a colonial nation or like a imperialist force is like back home. You bring the troops home, and then that's who you know what I mean. That's the people like who are reaping the benefits of like colonialism, imperialism. Are the final victims of it. You know what I mean? Like basically if you're not like at the top, like you're going to end up the victim of it. Whether, you know what I mean? Just the theme of like chickens kind of coming home to roost.
Yeah. And they definitely do in this movie. I mean, you don't even see Llewellyn die, which is again with the aftermath.
You kind of don't feel it when you see his You kind of don't feel it when you see his body, but when you see his wife's face, it's just like, oh God. Yeah. Do you remember that? Yeah.
I was shocked when I saw it in the theater, and you just pull up, you see Ed Tumbell pull up and see that he's dead. I was just like, how do you not? But again, that's talk about confident filmmaking.
It's like totally. I think it's in keeping actually too with the actual theme of this of Tommy Lee Jones's character, and he's constantly lamenting the constant, unexplainable, shocking stuff that keeps happening in the world. We as the audience are shocked to find, wait, he's just dead off screen, like he's killed. Yeah. Like we encounter him as Belle encounters him, and it's just another senseless, violent act, right? Which is really in keeping with sort of the theme of the movie, where, you know, we're living in this world where chaos reigns now, and there's nothing we can do about it. The surprise, he's like Vivian Lee in Psycho in a way. It's like,
so we can wrap up the actual movie and then rank them. But I think with that being said, like Sugar gets in the car accident and has to, you know, at the end he gets slammed, T-boned, you know, and Do you know one of those actors, those young kids, is Caleb Landry Jones?
Who's that?
He's a great actor now. You'd recognize him as the creepy psychopath brother in Get Out, and he's in a lot of
okay. He's in Twin Peaks: The Return. Okay,
that's
right. He is. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was the second kid that's like, give me half of that's mine, whatever.
Yeah.
When he was just a kid. But anyway, so like, that's another pair of people that sugar doesn't kill. And you don't really, it would have been pretty fucking harsh if he did. Not that he is above being harsh, but as a viewer, it would have been really fucking hard if he would have killed them after that. But he's even incapable of escaping the chaos of the world, Yeah. Even Shigor, who represents the chaos of the world, is incapable of like not existing in that too, where it's just like he's in all these life or death situations and then he just gets T-boned as he's fucking driving down the street. Like, I don't know. It's a fucking dark movie, guys.
But a great one.
But a great one.
The great ones always are.
So, we're going to end up having to like say so many movies.
I feel like the Wacko or Yakko from the Animaniacs, like singing all the names of the titles.
Exactly.
Like, there's like 20 movies at this point. It's like,
right.
So, all of mine are going to be the same. I'll just run through them really quick, except for,
I'm just going to read them in order off IMDb and just like pretend like it's interesting.
The hardest part right now is I'm still going to put Fargo at number 1 for me not as a critical evaluation, but just as like my favorite of their movies. Because I think, even though this one does represent like a higher level of filmmaking in some ways, I think that one I love the characters so much. I love like, it's just easier for me to watch. I don't know. Fargo's still number 1 for me. Then No Country for Old Men, Big Lebowski, Miller's Crossing, Raising Arizona, Blood Simple, Man Who Wasn't There, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, Barton Fink, Headsucker Proxy, Intolerable Cruelty, and Lady Killers.
Wow, I can't remember anything but Fargo. Okay.
Well, because who cares?
It's so many movies, but you go, Chris.
I mean, I'm just going to say my new list is really No Country for Old Men is just dethroned Fargo, but it's barely knocking it out. They're essentially tied in my book. I just really give No Country for Old Men the slight edge because I just really love how it really makes you pay great attention to the detail. Again, I just kind of get something new out of it every time. So they're pretty much tied with No Country for Old Men sitting in the unofficial number 1 spot.
Yeah,
Everything else just got bumped
We'll
down.
see what I say next week, like when we're talking, because it could easily jump to number 1 again. I don't know. It's right there for me too.
Totally.
Yep. What do you think, Travis?
Wait, what's your number 1, Chris? Sorry, can you say
No Country for Old Men just dethroned Fargo for number 1. But barely, like I said, it's basically neck and neck, but if I had to put him, in order, it's No Country right now. Maybe because I just saw it again, but it's just so fucking good.
Yeah, I still kind of, it's so good. It really is. We could have talked, like, I swear to God, like, if I had some more time and we could have, like, listed, like, all the incredible, and if I was into, like, a less sleepy state right now, like, there's so many parallels to their other movies. I really feel like this, in some ways, is like the ultimate Coen Brothers movie. Even though it doesn't have all the humor and stuff like that the Big Lebowski has. I think it's interesting that, Ian, you were saying like those two movies or those two characters represent so much of their world, because I think in those two movies you do get kind of like their whole filmmaking philosophy.
I do too, and I think if we're talking about it in terms of like what the ultimate Coen Brothers movies are, then I might put Big Lebowski and No Country for Old Men as like the tier number 1.
You almost have to pair them. You almost have to pair like Raising Arizona and Fargo. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, or this and that. Yeah, like, even though, and again, if you strip them down to their bare parts or adjust the dials, they're almost the same movies. Some of them, you know what I mean?
Really
like
are.
Raising Arizona and Fargo, like Raising Arizona and this one. It's so crazy. Anyway, in that spirit, I still have to kind of go with my tiered system, because like it's so hard to like, what's worth more, or what is more amazing to me, like the way they pull off like the dream sequences in Big Lebowski, or the way they do these kind of like real time kind of scenes in No Country for Old Men. I'm almost tempted to say No Country for Old Men is my favorite, just because it does feel so unique and so instantly kind of classic, the way they kind of like lay out these scenes. Again, it seemed like not even that much is happening, but the way they kind of play with tension in those scenes and the way they just kind of show you things and the way the images stick with you, the sounds and everything like that. It really is just like a tour de force of like very gentle, like gently rising waves of tension that just crash on you. Just an amazing movie.
Can I want to interrupt you really quick before you keep going.
I haven't even listened.
I know, but I do think that like No Country for Old Men is specific to them in that it's the first movie that like, you know, they're so referential in so many of their movies, and this one feels fucking brand new. Like I don't even know what, you know, Blood Simple would not exist without like a touch of evil, and like, you know, Raising Arizona is like a complete like, you know, tour de force of like, you know, originality, but it also has so many references to like classic screwball movies and like Looney Tunes and stuff like that. This one, like, I don't know what its predecessor is besides the book. You know what I mean?
Totally. It really feels like going from a book and like a contemporary book for maybe the first time really gave them the opportunity to like do something new and like I said, just kind of free fall just based on their own skill and not be as referential. Yeah, great point. Even though again, like I think there are these kind of like these shadows of film noir and horror and
Sergio Leone,
the Western, Sergio Leone, totally like existing over the film. So I think some of that is there too. But yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so my first tier is the top four basically are this movie, No Country for Old Men, Fargo, Raising Arizona, and then kind of at the lower end of that is The Big Lebowski, which is like so much wonderful stuff in that movie, even though there's a couple parts that I don't love. Right below that one is The Man Who Wasn't There, which I think is like could have easily been one of their kind of just kind of weird, what's the word? Indulgent kind of movies where but it just works so well in so many ways, and it's so skillfully done and kind of powerful, and to me personally at least. So that's like right below that top tier. Then Blood Simple kind of stands alone, kind of at the just a great movie. Right below that, and these could switch place, Blood Simple with these three. The kind of like Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, Hudsucker Proxy, which just like they really do bring me a lot of joy, even though I don't think they're like great stories or something. Like there's something kind of lacking to all of them as well. The more I think about it, I think Serious Man is going to be like a replay of Barton Fink for me a little bit. I'm really excited to watch that one, even though I think it's like my my least favorite of the rest of them that we have to go. Anyway, below those are the quote-unquote bad movies. I don't think Oh Brother Where Art Thou is a bad movie, but for me it just does not work as well as the rest of them at all. Like it's a big leap from Oh Brother Where Art Thou to like Barton Fink, which is maybe my least favorite of those three I mentioned. And then below those are the actual bad movies, Intolerable Cruelty and Lady Killers. Yeah, and I
honestly, they have been swept from my brain after this movie. Like, I just feel like they don't exist anymore.
We also took a week off. People don't know this. We're recording this in late 2010, and so we're just like casually releasing this. When it comes out, it comes out. You know,
I can't wait for Inside Llewyn Davis. I heard that's going to be a great movie someday.
We'll see. We'll be the judge of that. But
True Grit's coming out this year, guys. Awesome.
Oh, that's going to be a good one. But anyway, so that's my ranking. Yeah, I think they have made a couple bad movies, but I really think with No Country for Old Men, it's like such a powerful reset. And from here on out, I think we enter a new era of them just kind of like, I don't want to call it no frills, but just like very much like we know what we're doing.
They're just
very solid. They're old men. They don't need to like prove anything in a way. Yeah,
even their indulgent ones like Hail Caesar and stuff that are coming up, like they work better in some ways than some of the other indulgent ones, you know?
Or they don't. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
All right.
Like I think the fun parts of those movies like don't kind of reach the crazy fun parts of like the Hudsucker Proxy, honestly. You know what I mean?
I agree.
I think there's something like goofy that they lose in this new era. And but I don't, I think that's just time.
I think that's why I still had Fargo at number 1. We can finish this fucking talk.
No.
But it's just because I like that goofiness so much.
Totally.
That like is so specifically Coen Brothers.
Yes.
And like Fargo's like not a goofy movie, but it's there for sure. Like, I don't know. In that it's not in this one really.
Right.
All right, guys. Good game.
Pleasure talking to you.
Until we meet again.
All right,
see you guys later.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.